There is a photograph of a lagoon in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, taken from space in February of 2015. Shallow turquoise water, a white sand spit, nothing else. 5 weeks later, one of the strongest storms ever recorded in the South Pacific passed over this island. And when the water cleared, the next satellite frame showed something new. A dark shape, about 40 feet long, lying in the shallows. It had not been there before. The people who found it believe it is the fuselage of a Lockheed Electra. The airplane Amelia Earhart was flying when she vanished in 1937. The people who spent 30 years building the very theory that points to this island say it's a log. This October, 16 people will sail 6 days across open ocean to settle it, with sonar, magnetometers, and a dredge. This is the story of the shape in the lagoon, the 90-year case that led to it, the fight over what it is, and the 5 days that could end aviation's greatest mystery, or embarrass everyone who believed. July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan are 22,000 miles into a flight around the world. Ahead of them, the hardest single leg ever attempted, 2,500 miles of open Pacific, aimed at an island 2.5 kilometers long. What almost nobody in the crowds knew was how much had already gone wrong. Before this flight, Earhart had removed the plane's trailing wire antenna, the one that transmitted on the marine emergency frequency every ship at sea was listening to. Her reasoning, in her own words, both she and Noonan were rank amateurs at Morse code. So the marine frequency radio would have been just that much more dead weight to carry, and we decided to leave it in California. Her technical advisor learned she had departed from a radio news broadcast. He was furious, and a friend remembered, said he smelled disaster. The Coast Guard cutter waiting for her at Howland got no flight plan at all. The people her life depended on found out she was coming from the newspapers. The man beside her could find anything. Fred Noonan had drawn Pan American's routes across this same ocean. The man who taught the Clippers how to cross the Pacific. Over the Gulf of Mexico, weeks earlier, he'd hit a coastline within a minute of his prediction, navigating by nothing but a clock and the sun. If anyone could hit a 2-kilometer island by hand, it was him. Waiting at Howland is a Coast Guard cutter called Itasca, its radio room logging every word she sends. At 7:42 in the morning, her voice is strong enough that the operators look out the windows expecting to see her. "We must be on you but cannot see you. Gas is running low." And at 8:43, the last message anyone would ever confirm. "We are on the line, 157-337. Then the Pacific goes quiet. 157-337. It's a compass bearing, a line drawn across the ocean through Howland Island. She was somewhere on that line. Fly it northwest. Empty water for 1,000 miles. Fly it southeast. And the first dry land you reach is a ring of coral called Gardner Island. Today is named Nikumaroro, the lagoon from the satellite photograph. The Navy actually flew over Gardner that July. Their report noted signs of recent habitation on an island that was supposed to be uninhabited. They decided the signs were old and flew on. The largest search in aviation history to that date ended with nothing. But for 2 weeks after she vanished, the ocean wasn't silent. 120 radio signals were reported on her frequencies. Decades later, TIGAR's engineers re-examined every one of them and judged 57 credible. And here is the physics that matters. The Electra could only transmit if it was on land, with an engine running to charge the batteries. A 15-year-old girl in Florida, scanning shortwave with her notebook open, transcribed 3 hours of a woman's voice pleading for help. days after the plane could still have been flying. Her pages survive. 3 years later, in 1940, a British colonial officer named Gerald Gallagher was clearing brush on Nikumaroro for a new settlement and found a human skull. Near it, the remains of a campfire, bird bones, a woman's shoe, and a wooden box built to hold a marine sextant, a navigator's tool, Fred Noonan's kind of tool. The bones were shipped to Fiji, measured by a doctor named Hoodless, declared male, and then lost. Every bone. All that survived was his page of 7 measurements. In 2018, forensic anthropologist Richard Jantz re-ran those 7 measurements against Earhart's known body dimensions. His conclusion: the bones were more similar to Amelia Earhart than 99% of individuals, and one photograph refuses to go away. In October 1937, 3 months after the disappearance, a British officer named Eric Bevington photographed Nikumaroro's reef edge. Decades later, analysts noticed something in his frame: a small shape breaking the water, right where a landing gear would stand if an airplane had been wrecked on the reef. The Bevington Object, blurry, contested, never explained. It never became proof. You can't DNA test measurements on a page. But the island kept producing questions, and in 2020, a man with a laptop found the biggest one yet. Michael Ashmore wasn't an archaeologist. He was scrolling satellite maps of Nikumaroro. And at the tip of a small peninsula called Taraia, in water shallow enough to wade, he saw a shape, 40-something feet, straight edges, half buried. He measured it against the one airplane everyone hoped it could be. The Electra's fuselage, 12.2 meters. The shape, reported at 12 to 14. In September 2020, he sent his screen capture to the one organization that had spent 3 decades arguing Earhart died on this exact island. Tigger put it to their research forum. 2 weeks, more than 50 posts. Their consensus: it's a coconut tree. Ashmore refused to accept it. He built his own website, issued his own press release, and the story took on a life of its own. There's an irony buried in the geography. Nikumaroro wasn't always empty. From 1939, a British colonial settlement lived on this atoll. The same settlement Gallagher was building when he found the bones. For 24 years, people fished this lagoon, walked this sandspit. And then drought drove the colony out, and the island went silent again. Whatever lies at Taraia spent those years a few hundred meters from a village. Because here's the thing that argument couldn't kill. The shape has a history. Satellite archives hold 26 images of this lagoon going back to 2009. In every frame before March 2015, nothing. Then Cyclone Pam, one of the most powerful storms ever recorded in the South Pacific. Tears passed the island. The next frame, April 27th. The shape is there. The claim from the expedition's own scientists. The storm stripped away the sediment that had been covering it. And then it vanished again. Visible in May of 2020. Gone from imagery 2 months later, swallowed by silt. Whatever it is, the lagoon keeps burying it. There was even an earlier witness. A helicopter photograph from 2001 shows an unexplained white reflection at the same spot. Teams on the ground that year couldn't reach it. The water was murky, and the bottom, they said, was like quicksand. So why isn't this simply the discovery? Because the strongest case against it comes from the people who want it to be true the most. Tigger, the group behind the Nikumaroro theory itself, wrote it plainly. We think the object is a log because, well, it looks like a log, and it's easy to explain how it got there. Their evidence is uncomfortably good. In 2015, their team photographed this exact shoreline after the storm season. Coconut palms ripped out by the roots, root balls exposed. A trunk washed into the lagoon would drift until it snagged, precisely where the sand spit at Taraia would catch it. Look closely at the satellite frame, they say, and you can even see the dark root ball at the end of the log. And one more problem. In 2001, Tiger walked this area with metal detectors. The sill is only inches deep. A 40-foot aluminum fuselage should have screamed. The expedition's answer, that same murky water and quicksand bottom, made a real search impossible. You can't sweep what you can't stand on. 2 teams, the same year, the same shallows. And they can't even agree on what was searchable. Even the dates are contested. Tiga says the shape first shows up in imagery from 2016. The expedition's own 26-frame archive says April 2015, right after the storm. Small detail. But in this story, every detail has a lawyer. And the discoverer himself. He believes Earhart landed in the lagoon and dismisses the radio evidence and the reef landing case that Tigar spent decades assembling. Their reply was surgical. That's not the way science-based investigation works. Which brings us to the only sentence everyone signs. Somebody has to go and look. We have to go to Nikumaroro, says Rick Pettigrew, the archaeologist leading the expedition, and get a close look at the Taraia Object. October 7th. 16 people, archaeologists, sonar specialists, 2 representatives of the Republic of Kiribati, board a ship called the Marin Meniku and sail 6 days from Tarawa, then 5 days on one object in knee-deep water. And the plan reads like a checklist for interrogating the seafloor. First, drones map the site from above. Then a magnetometer listens for iron and steel. Then side-scan sonar and a sub-bottom profiler draw the shape under the silt. Then a hydroprobe touches it and answers the only question that matters in one instant: wood or aluminum. And if it's metal, a hydraulic dredge clears the silt, and a camera finally looks at what the lagoon has been hiding for 90 years. 5 days sounds short until you price the alternative. This lagoon sits 1,000 kilometers from the nearest airstrip. Everything, fuel, food, sonar, dredge, doctors, sails with them or doesn't exist. In 1937, the Navy gave the whole ocean 2 weeks. In 2026, 5 days on one 40-foot shape is the most concentrated attention any piece of this mystery has ever received. The whole operation cost about $900,000. When it was announced, $400,000 was pledged. The rest, they're still raising. And the university writing part of the checks has been in this story from the first page. In April 1937, George Putnam, Earhart's husband, wrote to produce Stanley Makel. The world flight had raised $69,500, and $60,000 of it had bought the airplane. When she crashed in Hawaii, it was Purdue's donors he hoped would cover the repairs. Purdue paid for the Electra when it flew. Now Purdue is paying to find out if it's been lying in 6 feet of water all along. And if you doubt how cruel this search can be, remember January 2024. A former Air Force intelligence officer named Tony Romeo sold his real estate portfolio, $11 million, to scan the deep ocean near Howland. His sonar returned a shape with wings, the right size, 16,000 feet down. For 10 months, it was the biggest Earhart story in decades. Then a robot camera finally reached it. Rock, a natural formation in the exact silhouette of a twin-engine airplane. Romeo called it the cruelest formation ever created by nature. So what happens in October? One of three things. They find wood, and the Taraia Object joins 90 years of almost, the rock that wore the shape of a plane, the bones that vanished, the photographs that proved nothing. They find aluminum, and a dredge in a lagoon quietly ends the greatest missing person case of the 20th century, on the exact island the Navy overflew in 1937. Or the lagoon simply refuses to answer. The silt too deep, the water too dark, the funding too short. It has buried this thing twice already. Amelia Earhart was somewhere on that line. 157,337. 89 years later, 16 people are betting $900,000 that the line ends 40 feet from a beach, under a few inches of sand. When the ships reach the lagoon in October, this file reopens. And whatever the hydroprobe touches, you'll hear it here first. Until then, look at the shape yourself. The frames are on screen. Log-or-Electra. Tell us below which side of the table you're on. And subscribe so you'll hear the day the lagoon answers.